I found a lottery ticket in my trash can. My daughter-in-law called me a thief on live television. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I would share. And if for even a second this feels familiar, I only ask that you like this video and subscribe. It will help me keep opening my heart. My name is Dorothy, and I'm 74 years old. I live on the third floor of a brick building in Rogers Park, Chicago, where the L train rattles my windows every 15 minutes. The sound used to annoy me. Now it's the only companion that visits me regularly. Every morning, I wake up at 5:30, not because I want to, but because my body won't let me sleep anymore. I shuffle to my small kitchen in my worn slippers, the linoleum floor cold beneath my feet. The coffee maker gurgles to life while I stare out at the gray December morning. Snow dusts the fire escapes and the skeletal branches of the oak tree that somehow survives in this concrete jungle. I've lived in this apartment for 12 years now. After Harold left me for his secretary, I had to downsize everything. The house in Evanston, the car, the dreams. Everything got smaller, quieter, lonelier. That Tuesday morning started like any other. I was sorting through the pile of bills on my kitchen table when I noticed the trash can overflowing again. My arthritic fingers struggled with the plastic bag, and as I lifted it, something fell out. A crumpled lottery ticket, stained with coffee grounds and what looked like mustard from an old sandwich wrapper. I almost threw it back in. Almost. Something made me smooth it out against the counter. The numbers were barely visible under a smear of ketchup, but I could make them out. I walked to my purse, where I keep a small notebook with the winning numbers from the Tribune clipping I'd saved from 3 days ago. My hands started shaking before I even finished checking the first line. 2, 14, 28, 35, 41, bonus number 12. Every single number matched. I checked again, then a third time. Then I sat down hard on my kitchen chair and stared at that dirty piece of paper like it might disappear if I blinked. $57 million. The ticket was worth $57 million. But here's the thing that makes this story so twisted it still keeps me awake at night. This ticket shouldn't have been in my trash. I don't gamble. Haven't bought a lottery ticket in probably 15 years. The last time was when Harold and I were still married, and even then, he called it a waste of money. So how did it end up crumpled in my garbage? Let me tell you about my son Michael and his wife Sandra. They live in a beautiful colonial in Wilmette, with their 2 children, Jamie and Kevin. Michael works in finance downtown, something with investments and stock portfolios that I never quite understood. Sandra doesn't work. She spends her time at yoga classes and organizing charity galas for causes she discovers on Instagram. They visit me exactly 3 times a year: Christmas, my birthday in March, and Thanksgiving if Sandra doesn't have other plans. Each visit follows the same script. They arrive 45 minutes late, Sandra stays glued to her phone, and Michael asks if I'm managing okay on my Social Security. Then Sandra starts mentioning things they need. New tires for her BMW. Jamie needs money for that expensive dance class. The roof needs repair. And like a fool, I always find a way to help. I've given them over $30,000 in the past 5 years. Money I couldn't afford to give, scraped together from my tiny pension and the part-time job I kept at the grocery store until my back gave out. I told myself it was what good mothers do, what good grandmothers do. But holding that lottery ticket in my kitchen, I started remembering things differently. 3 days before I found the ticket, Sandra had called me. Not to check how I was doing, not to invite me to dinner, to tell me they were coming over to drop off some old magazines and clean out their car in my parking space. "We'll just dump the trash in your bin, Dorothy," she'd said. Not Mom, never Mom, always Dorothy, like I was the help. They'd stayed exactly 27 minutes. I know because I'd been hoping they might stay for coffee, might ask about the doctor's appointment I'd mentioned last time. They didn't. Sandra spent most of the visit on a conference call about some charity auction. Michael helped her carry 3 bags of garbage from their car to my dumpster area. I'd watched from my window as Sandra pulled a handful of papers from her purse and tossed them into my trash can. Lottery tickets, I'd thought at the time. She was always buying them at the gas station. So when I found that winning ticket in my garbage, I knew exactly where it had come from. Now I faced a choice that would change everything. Do I call Michael and tell him his wife threw away $57 million? Do I pretend I never saw it? Or do I keep quiet and claim it myself? I spent the rest of that day pacing my small apartment, that ticket burning like fire in my hands. Every rational part of me said I should call Michael immediately. But another part, a part that had been growing stronger with each dismissive comment from Sandra, each birthday forgotten, each Christmas where I felt more like an obligation than family, whispered something different. Why should I call them? They threw it away, in my trash. They didn't even tell me they'd bought lottery tickets. By evening, I'd made my decision. The Illinois Lottery office is downtown on Madison Street. I took the L, clutching my purse like it contained the crown jewels. The whole ride, I kept expecting someone to tap me on the shoulder and tell me this was all a mistake, that I was a foolish old woman living in a fantasy. But the lottery officials confirmed what I already knew. It was real. It was worth exactly $57,300,000. And because Sandra had thrown it in my trash can, because I'd found it on my property, it was legally mine to claim. The payout would be $28.7 million after taxes if I took the lump sum. More money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. I signed the papers that afternoon. I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. That night, I sat in my apartment with a cup of tea, looking out at the city lights and thinking about what this money could mean. No more choosing between heating bills and groceries. No more watching my savings drain away every time Sandra mentioned something they needed. No more feeling like a burden every time I asked for help reaching something on a high shelf. For the first time in years, I felt powerful. But I also felt something else. Guilt. These were my son's children. This was my family. Shouldn't I share this blessing with them? I decided I would. The next morning, I called Michael. Mom, what's wrong? His voice carried that edge it always had when I called outside our scheduled times. Nothing's wrong, honey. I just wanted to let you know I found something that belongs to Sandra. Could you both come over tonight? There was a pause. What kind of something? Just come over around 7, both of you. I spent the day cleaning my apartment, buying good coffee and Sandra's favorite cookies from the bakery on Devon. I even put on my blue dress, the one I saved for special occasions. They arrived at 7:43. Sandra looked annoyed before she even stepped through my door. Dorothy, what's this about? We have Kevin's game tomorrow morning, and I still need to prepare his uniform. I led them to my small living room and brought out the coffee. My hands were shaking as I reached into my purse and pulled out the lottery ticket, now carefully preserved in a plastic sleeve. Sandra, you threw this in my trash can 3 days ago. She glanced at it without interest. So? It's a winning ticket. Michael leaned forward. Mom, those things are never worth more than a few dollars. I took a deep breath. This one is worth $57 million. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear Mrs. Chen's television through the thin walls. Sandra's face went through several expressions at once. Confusion, disbelief, then something sharp and calculating. That's impossible. I handed her the verification papers from the lottery office. Michael read them twice before he looked up at me. Mom, this is real? It's real. Sandra was on her feet, pacing my small living room like a caged animal. Wait just a minute. I bought that ticket. With my money. At the Shell station on Green Bay Road. And you threw it away, I said quietly. I threw it in your trash can. That doesn't make it yours. Her voice was getting louder. Michael was reading the papers again, his face pale. Sandra, you need to calm down, he said. Don't tell me to calm down. Your mother is trying to steal our money. The word steal hit me like a slap. I'm not stealing anything. You threw it away. In your trash can. On my property. The lottery officials confirmed it's legally mine. Sandra's face was red now. Legal? We'll see how legal it is when I call my lawyer. Michael, say something. My son looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not anger exactly, but something close to it. Disappointment, maybe. Mom, you know this ticket belongs to Sandra. She threw it away, Michael. She made a mistake. A $57 million mistake that she dumped in my garbage without even telling me she'd bought lottery tickets. I stood up, feeling steadier than I had in years. I came to you both because I wanted to share this. I was going to suggest we split it 3 ways. But if you think I'm a thief for claiming something that was thrown away on my property, then maybe we have nothing more to discuss. Sandra was pulling out her phone. I'm calling Channel 5. They love stories about elder abuse. Elder abuse? I almost laughed. Sandra, I've given you and Michael over $30,000 in the past 5 years. Money I couldn't afford. When have you ever given me anything except criticism and demands? That's different. How is it different? Because we're family. Because you're supposed to help family. And family is supposed to treat each other with respect. When's the last time you called me just to see how I was doing? When's the last time you included me in anything that wasn't an obligation? Michael stood up too, his face flushed. Mom, this isn't about our relationship. This is about doing the right thing. The right thing? I could feel 20 years of swallowed words rising in my throat. The right thing would have been Sandra calling me when she won instead of throwing the ticket away like garbage. The right thing would have been treating me like family instead of a convenient ATM. You're being ridiculous, Sandra snapped. Nobody treats you like an ATM. I walked to my kitchen drawer and pulled out a small notebook where I'd been tracking every request for money over the years. February 2019, $3,000 for Jamie's dance classes. June 2019, $1,500 for Michael's car repair. October 2019, $2,000 for your root canal, Sandra. December 2019, $5,000 for Christmas presents because you'd overspent. Should I continue? The silence stretched between us like a canyon. January 2020, $4,000 for Kevin's summer camp. March 2020, $1,000 for groceries when Michael's hours were cut. July 2020, stop, Michael said quietly. October 2021, $2,500 for your anniversary trip to Napa. November 2021, $800 for Thanksgiving dinner at your house, which I wasn't even invited to attend. Sandra's phone was in her hand, but she wasn't dialing. December 2021, $1,000 for Christmas gifts. Again. February 2022, $700 for Jamie's new school clothes. Should I keep going? Because I have 3 more pages. I closed the notebook. Over $30,000, Michael. And in all that time, how many phone calls did I get just asking how I was feeling? How many invitations to dinner that didn't come with a request for money? How many times did either of you offer to help me with anything? My son was staring at the floor. I had pneumonia last spring, I continued. I was in bed for 2 weeks. You know how I found out neither of you knew? Because when I finally recovered enough to go to the grocery store, I ran into your neighbor, Mrs. Patterson. She asked if I was feeling better, and when I looked confused, she said Sandra had mentioned at book club that I'd been sick. I sat back down, suddenly tired. You talked about my illness with strangers before you talked to me. Mom, Michael started. No, I'm not finished. I looked directly at Sandra. You want to call me a thief on television? Go ahead. But let's make sure they get the whole story. Let's talk about how you've treated your husband's elderly mother for the past 15 years. Let's talk about every birthday you've forgotten, every holiday you've made me feel unwelcome at, every time you've rolled your eyes when I spoke. Sandra's face was white now. You're exaggerating. Am I? Last Christmas, you spent the entire dinner on your phone planning your New Year's party. When I asked if you might save some room in your calendar for lunch with me sometime, you said, maybe, Dorothy, if things slow down. Things never slowed down, did they? I stood up and walked to my window, looking out at the L tracks. I've been lonely for so long I forgot what it felt like to matter to someone. Finding that ticket didn't just give me money, it gave me a choice. For the first time in decades, I had the power to say no. When I turned around, both of them were staring at me. I'm not stealing from you, Sandra. You threw that ticket away. But I'm also not giving you what you threw away and pretending it never happened. I'm 74 years old. I've spent the last 20 years putting everyone else's needs before my own. Maybe it's time I put myself first for once. Sandra was texting furiously. We'll see what Channel 5 thinks about this story. Good, I said. Make sure you tell them about the $30,000 too. They left without finishing their coffee. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was worried about Sandra's threats, but because I kept hearing my own voice saying those words. Words I'd been holding inside for decades. Maybe it's time I put myself first for once. The next morning, my doorbell rang at 8 a.m. I opened it to find my 13-year-old granddaughter Jamie standing in the hallway with tears in her eyes. Grandma, is it true? About the lottery ticket? I let her in and made her hot chocolate. It's true, sweetheart. Mom says you stole it from us. I sat down beside her on my small couch. Jamie, if I throw an apple in the garbage and you find it later, did you steal my apple? She thought about this. No, you threw it away. That's right. Your mom threw the lottery ticket in my trash can and walked away. She didn't know it was worth money, but she threw it away. So it's not stealing? The lottery people say it's not stealing. The law says it's not stealing. But more importantly, Jamie, even if your mom had kept that ticket, would any of that money have been spent making your grandma's life better? Jamie was quiet for a long moment. Probably not. Probably not, I agreed. She hugged me then, fiercer than she'd hugged me in years. I'm glad you found it, Grandma. You deserve something good. After Jamie left, I made a decision. I called a lawyer. Attorney Patricia Coleman had silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Her office overlooked Grant Park, and she served me tea in china cups while I explained my situation. Mrs. Henderson, she said when I finished, legally, you're absolutely in the clear. The ticket was discarded on your property. You have every right to claim it. But morally, she leaned back in her chair. That's not a legal question. But if I may speak as a woman who's also dealt with difficult family members, sometimes standing up for yourself isn't selfish. Sometimes it's necessary. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in 15 years. I went shopping for clothes. Real shopping, not just grabbing whatever was on sale at Target. I bought a beautiful wool coat in deep blue, soft cashmere scarves, comfortable shoes that actually fit properly. I got my hair cut and styled at a salon instead of trimming it myself in my bathroom mirror. When I looked in the mirror that evening, I saw a woman I barely recognized. Not because I looked younger, but because I looked confident. The next morning, Sandra's story aired on Channel 5. I was sitting in my new armchair, wearing my new blue coat, when my phone started ringing. The reporter had painted me as a greedy old woman who'd stolen a lottery ticket from her own family. Sandra cried on camera, talking about how devastated her children were, how they'd been counting on that money for college tuition. College tuition. Jamie was 13, and Kevin was 11. The story made me look like a villain, but something unexpected happened. The comments on the station's website started flooding in, and most of them weren't on Sandra's side. Why was she throwing away lottery tickets if she cared about the money? Sounds like classic financial elder abuse to me. Good for the grandmother. About time someone stood up for themselves. Mrs. Chen from down the hall knocked on my door that afternoon. Dorothy, I saw that terrible woman on TV. Don't you worry about what people think. Everyone in this building knows how they treat you. Then Mrs. Rodriguez from the second floor stopped by with homemade empanadas. I heard your family on the phone in the hallway once, she said quietly. The way they talked about you made me so angry. One by one, my neighbors came to check on me. People I'd barely spoken to over the years, who'd apparently been watching and listening and noticing how my son and daughter-in-law treated me. We see how you light up when those children visit, said Mr. Kim from across the hall. And we see how sad you look after they leave. I'd been surrounded by community all this time and never realized it. That evening, Jamie called me. Grandma, Mom made me watch her interview. She said you were making our family look bad. What do you think, sweetheart? I think she made our family look bad all by herself. 3 days later, my phone rang at 7 in the morning. It was Michael. Mom, we need to talk. He came over alone that afternoon. Without Sandra, without the children, without his usual rushing energy. He sat in my living room and looked around like he was seeing it for the first time. It's nice in here, he said. Cozy. I'd been redecorating with some of my winnings. New curtains, a comfortable reading chair, framed photographs of Chicago neighborhoods I'd always loved. Thank you. Mom, I owe you an apology. I waited. I've been thinking about what you said. About the $30,000. About the phone calls and the birthdays. He ran his hands through his hair. You're right. We've been treating you terribly. Michael, no. Let me finish. Sandra's been pushing me to keep our distance from you for years. She said you were too needy, too demanding. But you never demanded anything. You just gave, and gave, and gave. He stood up and walked to my window, staring out at the L tracks. I remember when Dad left. You worked 3 jobs to keep us in the house. You never bought yourself anything, never complained. And somehow I grew up thinking that was normal, that mothers were just supposed to sacrifice everything. I chose to sacrifice for my children, I said quietly. That's what mothers do. But children are supposed to grow up and take care of their mothers too. When's the last time I bought you a birthday present? A real one, not just a card Sandra picked up at CVS? I couldn't remember. When's the last time I called you just to see how your day was? I couldn't remember that either. Mom, I'm 46 years old. I make more money than I ever dreamed of when I was growing up in this city. I have investments, stock portfolios, assets worth millions of dollars, and you're living in a 3rd floor walk-up with a heating system that barely works, wearing the same coat you've had for 10 years. He turned back to me. That's not because you don't have a son who loves you. That's because you have a son who's been selfish and blind and letting his wife dictate how we treat our family. Michael, you don't have to. Yes, I do. I've watched you get smaller and quieter over the years, and I told myself it was just aging. But it wasn't aging. It was us. We were making you disappear. He sat back down, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. I don't want the lottery money, Mom. I never should have acted like I deserved it. Sandra was wrong to throw it away, and I was wrong to act like you stole it. But I want to ask you something else. I want to ask if you'll let me be your son again. Really your son. Not just the guy who shows up 3 times a year and leaves you feeling lonelier than before. I started crying then. Not sad tears, but tears of relief so overwhelming I couldn't speak. I want to take you to dinner every Sunday. Real dinner, at nice restaurants where we can talk. I want to call you every Wednesday just to hear about your day. I want to help you find a better apartment in a building with an elevator and closer to me. Michael, I want you to meet my kids. Really meet them. Not just see them when Sandra's rushing them out the door. I want them to know their grandmother the way I should have been letting them know her all along. What about Sandra? His face darkened. Sandra and I are going to have some very serious conversations about how she treats people I love. Starting with you. That night, after Michael left, I sat in my new chair and thought about forgiveness. How it doesn't mean pretending nothing happened. How it means choosing to build something better from what's left. But the story wasn't over yet. The next morning, I woke up to my phone ringing off the hook. Channel 5 was running a follow-up story, and this time they'd done their research. A young reporter named Jessica Martinez had apparently spent the week investigating Sandra's claims. She'd spoken to my neighbors, looked into public records, even found security camera footage from the Shell station where Sandra claimed to have bought the lottery ticket. The footage showed Sandra buying cigarettes and a Diet Coke, no lottery tickets. But more damaging than that, Jessica had somehow obtained Sandra's bank records, showing regular withdrawals from my account over the past 5 years. Money I'd given them that they'd never mentioned in the first interview. The second story painted a very different picture. An elderly woman who'd been financially supporting her son's family for years, only to be called a thief when she claimed a discarded lottery ticket. Sandra's phone call came at noon. "You did this," she said without any greeting. "You called that reporter and gave her our banking information." "I've never spoken to any reporter, Sandra." "Don't lie to me. How else would she know about the money? Maybe she's just good at her job." "This is destroying my reputation. My friends are asking questions. The charity board is reconsidering my position." I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "Sandra, you went on television and called me a thief. You knew you thrown that ticket away and you knew you'd been taking money from me for years, but you thought you could shame me into giving you $57 million anyway. It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. Dorothy, please, we can work this out. We can split the money like you originally suggested. That offer expired when you called me a thief on television. You can't be serious." "I'm very serious." There was a long pause. Then Sandra said something that revealed more about her character than anything else she'd done. "Fine, but don't expect to see the children anymore. Sandra, those children are not your property. They're not bargaining chips. They're human beings who deserve to know their grandmother. We'll see about that." She hung up. That afternoon, Jamie called me crying. "Grandma, Mom says we're not allowed to see you anymore. She says you're a bad influence." My heart broke. "Jamie, sweetheart, you're 13 years old. In a few years, you'll be able to make your own decisions about who you want to see." "But that's so long." "I know, honey, but I'll be here waiting when you're ready." "This is so unfair." Kevin's crying too. He doesn't understand why he can't see his grandma anymore. After I hung up, I sat in my apartment feeling the full weight of what standing up for myself had cost me. The money didn't matter much when measured against losing my grandchildren. But then I remembered something Mrs. Rodriguez had said, about hearing Sandra and Michael argue in the hallway about me, about how Sandra had been pushing Michael to cut me out of their lives for years. Sandra wasn't taking the children away because of the lottery ticket. She was just finally doing what she'd wanted to do all along. The difference was, now she couldn't do it quietly. Now everyone could see exactly what kind of person she was. Michael called me that evening. "Mom, I heard about Sandra's threat. She's angry. I understand." "No, you don't understand. She doesn't get to decide whether my children see their grandmother." "I do. We do." "Michael, I don't want to cause problems in your marriage." "You're not causing problems. You're revealing problems that were already there." The next Saturday, Michael picked me up in his car. Not for one of our obligatory visits, but for something new. "Where are we going?" "To look at apartments." He'd found a beautiful one-bedroom in Lincoln Park, just 6 blocks from his house. Hardwood floors, big windows, an elevator, and a doorman. Close to the lake, close to good restaurants, close to my grandchildren. "Michael, this is too expensive." "Mom, you won $57 million. You can afford it. But nothing. You've never bought yourself anything nice. You've lived in that walk-up for 12 years, giving us money you couldn't afford while you used space heaters because your landlord wouldn't fix the furnace." The apartment was perfect, light-filled and warm, with a view of the park where families walked their dogs and children played on swings. "What do you think?" Michael asked. "I think it's the most beautiful place I've ever seen." I put down a deposit that afternoon. Moving day came 3 weeks later. My neighbors from the old building formed an impromptu moving crew, carrying boxes and offering to help me settle in. Mrs. Chen had tears in her eyes when she hugged me goodbye. "You call me," she said. "Don't forget about us little people now that you're rich." "Never," I promised. The new apartment felt like a dream. I bought furniture that matched, art for the walls, plants for the windowsills. I had cable TV installed, something I'd gone without for years to save money. I bought books and magazines and good coffee. But the best part was Sunday dinner with Michael and the kids. Every week he'd pick me up and we'd go somewhere new. Jamie told me about school and her friends and her dreams of becoming a marine biologist. Kevin showed me his Pokemon card collection and taught me to play chess. Sandra never joined us. Michael said she was working through some things, but I could see the strain in his face. Their marriage was unraveling, and while I felt sad for the children, I couldn't pretend to be sorry that Sandra's manipulations were finally catching up with her. Spring came early that year. I joined a senior center in Lincoln Park and signed up for painting classes. I'd always wanted to learn to paint but never had the time or money for art supplies. My first painting was terrible. A lopsided bowl of fruit that looked more like colorful rocks. But I loved every minute of creating it. Art isn't about being good, my instructor told me. It's about expression. I started painting scenes from my childhood in Chicago, the old neighborhood where I'd grown up, long since gentrified beyond recognition, the diner where Harold and I had our first date, the hospital where Michael was born. Each painting was a memory preserved, a piece of my life given form and color. 3 months after I'd moved, Jamie started taking the bus to visit me after school, just for an hour or two before Michael picked her up. We'd do homework together, or I'd teach her to knit, or we'd just talk about her day. One afternoon, she asked me something that broke my heart. "Grandma, why didn't you ever fight back before?" "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "When Mom was mean to you, when she forgot your birthday or rolled her eyes when you talked, why didn't you ever get angry?" I thought about how to answer her, how to explain decades of small compromises and swallowed words. "I was afraid," I said finally. "Of what?" "Of being alone, of losing all of you. I thought if I kept giving, kept helping, kept being useful, then you'd all keep loving me." "That's not how love works, though," Jamie said with the clarity that only children possess. "No, honey, it's not. Real love doesn't have conditions." "That's right. So Mom never really loved you?" I pulled her close. "I think your mom is afraid too, afraid of a lot of things. Sometimes when people are afraid, they hurt others to make themselves feel better. That's not an excuse." "No, it's not, but it's an explanation." That summer, I did something I'd never done before. I planned a vacation, a real one, not just a weekend visiting relatives or a day trip to Wisconsin. I booked a cruise to Alaska, something I'd dreamed about since I was a young woman reading National Geographic in the library. Michael was excited for me. "Mom, you deserve this. You've never taken a real vacation in your entire life." He was right. Even when Harold and I were married, our trips had been practical. Visiting his parents, or cheap weekend getaways to save money. The cruise was magical. I watched glaciers calve into the ocean, saw whales breach in the distance, ate salmon fresh from Alaskan waters. I met other travelers and shared stories and laughed until my sides hurt. But the most wonderful part was the silence. Hours of standing on the deck, watching the world go by, with no one needing anything from me. No bills to worry about, no phone calls asking for money, no obligations except to myself. For the first time in my adult life, I experienced true peace. When I returned home, I found 17 messages on my answering machine from Sandra. The messages started calm and progressed to increasingly frantic. Apparently, she and Michael were getting divorced, and she wanted to discuss my role in their marital problems. I deleted them all without listening to the end. Michael came over the next evening looking exhausted. "How was Alaska?" "Beautiful." "How are you holding up?" He shrugged. "It's been coming for a long time, Mom. The lottery ticket was just the final straw." "I'm sorry." "Don't be." Sandra made her choices. She chose to treat you badly for 15 years. She chose to throw away a winning lottery ticket. She chose to go on television and call you a thief rather than admit she'd made a mistake. He sat down heavily in my new armchair. But mostly, she chose to try to keep my children away from their grandmother as punishment. That's when I knew I couldn't stay married to her. "What about Jamie and Kevin?" "Joint custody. They'll live with me most of the time. Sandra's moving back to California to live with her sister." I felt relief wash over me. My grandchildren would be staying in Chicago. "There's something else," Michael said. "I've been doing a lot of thinking about money, about how we treated you all those years." "Michael, you don't need to—" "Yes, I do. I've opened a savings account for you. I'm putting in $5,000 a month, money I should have been giving you all along instead of taking from you. I don't need your money anymore. I know you don't need it, but I need to give it. I need to show you that love isn't just taking, it's giving back." Tears filled my eyes. "You being my son again is all I need. You're getting both." That fall, Jamie started high school. She'd grown 3 inches over the summer and developed an interest in journalism, inspired by Jessica Martinez's investigative reporting. "I want to tell stories that matter," she told me. "Like the story about you and the lottery ticket." "What story is that?" "About standing up for yourself. About not letting people walk all over you just because they're family." She was writing an essay for her English class about ethical dilemmas. "Can I interview you, Grandma? About your decision to keep the ticket?" We spent an afternoon in my apartment, Jamie asking thoughtful questions while I tried to explain the complexity of my situation. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked finally. "Regret keeping the ticket?" "Yes." I thought about this carefully. No. I regret that keeping it was necessary. I regret that your parents put me in a position where I had to choose between being taken advantage of and being called a thief. But I don't regret choosing myself for once. Good, she said firmly. You shouldn't. Winter came early that year, but I wasn't dreading it like I had in years past. My new apartment stayed warm, I had money for good food and warm clothes, and I had dinner plans with my family every Sunday. On Christmas morning, Michael and the kids came over to my apartment to open presents. It was the first Christmas in decades where I hadn't felt like an afterthought or an obligation. Jamie gave me a framed copy of her essay titled My Grandmother's Courage. Kevin had made me a chess set in his woodworking class, with pieces carved to look like different Chicago landmarks. My presents for them weren't just hastily purchased gift cards like in years past. I'd thoughtfully chosen things that reflected their interests and personalities. Art supplies for Jamie, who'd started sketching. A telescope for Kevin, who'd become fascinated with astronomy. This is the best Christmas ever, Kevin said, and I realized it was mine too. That afternoon, Sandra called. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up the phone. Dorothy? It's Sandra. I know. I'm calling to apologize. I waited. What I did last year was wrong, all of it. The way I treated you, the things I said on TV, trying to keep the kids away from you. I was angry and embarrassed, and I took it out on you. Thank you for saying that. I lost my marriage over this. I lost my kids. I had to move back to California with my tail between my legs. I'm sorry you've been struggling. There was a long pause. Are you really? I considered this. Yes, I am. I'm sorry you felt so insecure that you had to tear other people down to feel better about yourself. I'm sorry you were so afraid of not being in control that you threw away a marriage and a relationship with your children. I'm genuinely sorry for your pain, Sandra. But you're not sorry you kept the ticket. No, I'm not sorry about that. I figured. Another pause. The kids are happy, she said finally. Jamie sends me pictures sometimes of you teaching her to knit, of Kevin playing chess. They talk about you a lot in our video calls. They're wonderful children. They are. And they love you. They really, genuinely love you. Not because you give them things, but because you listen to them. Because you make them feel important. They are important. I know that now. I didn't always know that. After she hung up, I sat in my chair looking out at the snow falling on Lincoln Park. Children were sledding down the hill while their parents watched from benches, breath visible in little puffs of warm air. I thought about forgiveness again. How it's not about forgetting what happened or pretending it didn't hurt. It's about choosing not to let someone else's actions poison your own heart. I forgave Sandra that day. Not because she deserved it, but because I deserved the peace that comes with letting go of anger. Spring arrived with an explosion of color in the park. I'd taken up photography as well as painting, and I spent hours capturing the city I loved in different seasons and lights. One morning, I was photographing tulips when a young woman approached me. "Excuse me, are you Dorothy Henderson?" I tensed, wondering if this was another reporter. "I'm Maria Santos. I saw your story on the news last year." "Oh, I just wanted to thank you." "Thank me?" My grandmother was in a similar situation. My aunt was taking money from her, treating her terribly, making her feel guilty for asking for any help. But after she saw your story, she finally stood up for herself. Maria pulled out her phone and showed me a picture of an elderly woman smiling in a bright, cheerful apartment. She moved out of my aunt's basement and into her own place. She stopped giving money to family members who only called when they needed something. She started saying no. How is she doing? She's happier than I've ever seen her. She joined a book club, started volunteering at the animal shelter. She has a life now, not just an existence. Maria squeezed my hand. So thank you. Your courage gave her courage. After she walked away, I sat on a park bench and cried. Happy tears this time. I thought about all the letters I'd received over the past year, from elderly people who'd seen my story and found the strength to set boundaries with exploitative family members, from adult children who'd recognized themselves in Michael's story and reached out to parents they'd been neglecting. The lottery ticket had given me financial freedom, but sharing my story had given me something even more valuable. The knowledge that my experience mattered, that other people had seen themselves in my situation and found the courage to change their own lives. That summer, I started volunteering at a senior center, teaching art classes and leading support groups for older adults dealing with family conflict. It wasn't easy work. There was a lot of pain in those rooms, but it was fulfilling in ways I'd never experienced. I also started dating. At 75, I thought that part of my life was over, but then I met Robert at the senior center. He was a widower, a retired teacher with kind eyes and a gentle sense of humor. Our first date was coffee and a walk through Lincoln Park Zoo. Our second was dinner at a little Italian restaurant in Little Italy. By our third date, I realized I was falling in love again. I never thought this would happen to me at this age, I told him. Love doesn't have an expiration date, he replied. Michael was thrilled when I introduced him to Robert. I haven't seen you this happy since I was a kid, he said. He was right. I felt lighter, younger, more alive than I had in decades. Jamie, now 16 and even more thoughtful than before, asked me one day, "Grandma, do you think you would have met Robert if you hadn't found the lottery ticket?" It was a good question. I don't know, sweetheart, but I think I needed to learn to value myself before I could let someone else value me. That makes sense. The lottery money gave me choices I never had before, but the real change came from deciding I deserved better treatment. The money just made it easier to enforce that decision. Now, 2 years later, I wake up every morning in my beautiful apartment, make coffee in my sunny kitchen, and look out at a city that feels full of possibilities instead of limitations. I think about that day when I found the crumpled lottery ticket in my trash can, how it felt like seeing a light in the dark. I had no idea that light would illuminate not just my bank account, but my entire life. The money was wonderful. The freedom from financial worry, the ability to travel and buy nice things and help others, all of that was a gift I never expected to receive. But the real prize was learning to stand up for myself. Learning that love shouldn't come with a price tag. Learning that being alone is not the worst thing that can happen to you. Being taken for granted is worse. Michael and I have dinner every Sunday, just like he promised. Not obligation dinners where everyone watches the clock, but real conversations where we share our lives with each other. He's remarried now, to a wonderful woman named Catherine who treats me like family from day one. Not because she wants something from me, but because that's the kind of person she is. Kevin is 18 now, a freshman at Northwestern studying computer science. He still comes to play chess with me every Wednesday after class. Jamie is a senior in high school, editor of the school newspaper, planning to study journalism at Columbia. She's already written 3 more articles inspired by my story, all about social justice issues affecting elderly people. Sandra and I exchange Christmas cards now. Cordial, but distant. She's remarried too, to someone she met in California. I hope she's learned to be kinder to the people who love her, but that's not my responsibility anymore. I still have the original lottery ticket, framed in my bedroom. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder. A reminder that sometimes the most valuable things come disguised as garbage. Sometimes standing up for yourself feels like the hardest thing in the world, but it's actually the beginning of everything good. Most importantly, that it's never too late to claim what belongs to you, whether it's a lottery ticket, respect from your family, or just the right to live your life on your own terms. Some people think I was lucky to find that ticket. They're right, but not in the way they think. I was lucky to find it at exactly the moment in my life when I was finally ready to claim it. When I was finally ready to stop apologizing for taking up space in my own life. The real fortune wasn't in the numbers on that ticket. It was in learning that I was worth fighting for, that my happiness mattered, that love without respect isn't really love at all. And you know what? The money's been nice, but the peace has been priceless. If you've ever lived through something similar, if you've ever been made to feel like your only value is what you can give to other people, I want you to know that you deserve better. You deserve to be loved for who you are, not what you can provide. You deserve to say no without feeling guilty. You deserve to put yourself first sometimes. But what I've learned since then has been even more profound. The lottery ticket was just the beginning. It was the catalyst that forced me to examine not just my relationship with my family, but my relationship with myself. You see, after Robert and I had been dating for about 6 months, he asked me something that stopped me in my tracks. We were walking along Lake Michigan, watching the sunrise paint the water gold, when he said, "Dorothy, what did you love to do before you spent all your time taking care of everyone else?" I couldn't answer him. I literally couldn't remember. For so many years, I had defined myself entirely through my relationships with other people. I was Michael's mother, Harold's wife, Jamie and Kevin's grandmother, Sandra's convenient source of emergency funds. But who was I when I stripped all of that away? I used to read, I said finally. I used to love reading. What kind of books? I thought harder. Mystery novels. I loved trying to solve the puzzle before the detective did. And poetry. I used to read poetry and sometimes try to write my own. Robert smiled. When's the last time you wrote a poem? I couldn't remember. Probably not since Michael was small, maybe 30 years ago. That weekend, I went to a bookstore for the first time in years. Not to buy a cookbook or a self-help book about managing finances on a fixed income, but just to browse, to rediscover what I actually enjoyed. I came home with 6 mystery novels and a journal with a deep blue cover that reminded me of Lake Michigan. That night, I sat in my comfortable chair and tried to remember how it felt to write just for the joy of it. The first poem was terrible. Clunky rhymes about finding lottery tickets and standing up to bullies. But the second one was better. It was about the L train that used to annoy me so much, and how I'd learned to hear music in its rhythm. By the third poem, I was crying. Not sad tears, but tears of recognition. I was remembering who I used to be, before life ground me down into someone who apologized for existing. I showed the poems to Robert a few weeks later, nervous as a teenager showing her first crush a love letter. "These are beautiful," he said. "You have a real gift. They're just silly scribblings." "No, they're not. They're your voice, your real voice, not the voice you use to make everyone else comfortable." I started showing my work at the senior center. There was a monthly open mic night where residents could share talents, singing, playing instruments, reading their writing. I'd been attending for months but never participating. The first time I read one of my poems aloud, my hands shook so badly I could barely hold the paper. It was a poem about my old apartment, about learning to find beauty in small, worn things. When I finished, the room was silent for a moment. Then Mrs. Patterson, yes, the same Mrs. Patterson who used to know about my health before my own son did, started clapping. Soon the whole room was applauding. "Dorothy," she said afterward, "I had no idea you were a writer." Neither did I thought. But I was learning. The poetry led to other things. I joined a writing group at the library, where I met people from all walks of life who shared my love of words. There was Maria, a retired nurse who wrote heartbreaking short stories about her experiences in the ICU. There was James, a former construction worker who crafted the most beautiful haikus about city mornings. For the first time in my adult life, I was part of a community that knew me for what I created, not what I could provide. One evening, about 9 months after I'd started writing again, Jamie came to visit with exciting news. "Grandma, I got into Northwestern's journalism program. Early admission." I hugged her tight, so proud of this brilliant, thoughtful girl. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. But I thought you had your heart set on Columbia." "I did," she said. "But then I realized something. The best stories are happening right here, like your story. Like all the stories of the people you work with at the senior center." She pulled out her laptop. "I want to show you something." It was a proposal for her senior project, a documentary about elder abuse and financial exploitation, told through the stories of seniors who had found the courage to fight back. "I want you to be the main narrator," she said. "But I also want to interview some of the people from your support groups, if they're willing. I think this could make a real difference." I wasn't sure how I felt about being the public face of elder abuse recovery. The Channel 5 interviews had been traumatic enough. But as Jamie explained her vision, a series that would help other families recognize the warning signs, that would give seniors the tools to protect themselves, I felt the same sense of purpose I'd experienced when Maria thanked me in the park. "Let me think about it," I said. But I already knew my answer. The documentary project took 8 months to complete. Jamie interviewed 12 seniors, including several from my support group. She spoke with attorneys who specialized in elder abuse cases, social workers who'd seen the devastation that financial exploitation could cause, and adult children who had recognized their own behavior in our stories and worked to change. The hardest part was revisiting my own story. Not just the lottery ticket incident, but the decades that led up to it. The slow erosion of my self-worth, the way I'd learned to make myself smaller and smaller until I was barely visible in my own life. One afternoon, while Jamie was editing footage of my interview, she asked me something that I'm still thinking about. "Grandma, do you think you would have eventually stood up to Mom and Dad even without the lottery ticket? Or do you think you would have just kept giving them money and accepting their treatment forever?" It was a painful question because I wasn't sure of the answer. "I'd like to think I would have found my voice eventually," I said, "but I'm not sure. The money gave me power. Not just financial power, but psychological power. For the first time, I had something they wanted more than what I'd already given them. That's kind of sad, isn't it? That it took $57 million for them to pay attention to you as a person?" "Yes," I said. "It's very sad, but it's also reality for a lot of older adults. We live in a society that devalues elderly people, especially elderly women. We're seen as resources to be used up, not individuals with our own needs and desires." Jamie was quiet for a moment. "The documentary is going to help change that, isn't it?" "I hope so, sweetheart. But real change has to start with each person deciding they're worth fighting for. Money or no money." Grandma's Voice, Reclaiming Dignity in Later Life, premiered at Northwestern's Student Film Festival in May. I was terrified to see my story projected on a big screen, worried that I would come across as bitter or vindictive. I didn't need to worry. Jamie had crafted a nuanced, compassionate portrait of a complex situation. She didn't demonize Sandra, or even paint me as a perfect victim. She showed how family dysfunction develops gradually, how good people can make bad choices, and how it's possible to change course at any stage of life. The film won first place in the documentary category. More importantly, it caught the attention of a local PBS affiliate, which offered to broadcast it as part of their community issues programming. The night it aired, I hosted a viewing party in my apartment. Michael and Catherine came bringing homemade lasagna and a bottle of good wine. Kevin drove down from Northwestern with 2 of his friends, who were fascinated to meet the lottery grandma they'd heard so much about. Robert brought flowers and his famous chocolate chip cookies. Even some of my neighbors from the old building came. Mrs. Chen, Mrs. Rodriguez, Mr. Kim. It was strange to see them in my new spacious apartment, but it felt right to have them witness this moment. As we watched my story unfold on screen, I felt a complicated mix of emotions. Pride in Jamie's work, gratitude for the journey that had brought me to this point, and yes, some lingering sadness for all the years I'd wasted being afraid to take up space. When the credits rolled, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. "Mom," Michael said, his voice thick with emotion, "I'm so proud of you." "For what?" "For being brave enough to tell the truth, for turning your pain into something that can help other people." Mrs. Chen, who rarely showed emotion, walked over and hugged me tightly. "You inspire me," she said simply. The documentary's impact went beyond what any of us expected. Within a week of airing, the PBS station had received dozens of emails from viewers sharing their own stories. Adult Protective Services reported an increase in calls from seniors seeking help. 3 local law firms reached out to offer pro bono services to elder abuse victims. Most meaningfully to me, I received a letter from a woman named Eleanor, who was 82 years old and living in Seattle. "Dear Dorothy," she wrote, "I watched your documentary last night and saw my own life reflected back at me. For 15 years, my son and his wife have been asking me for money. First small amounts, then larger and larger sums. They promised it was always temporary, always a loan they would pay back. I've given them over $60,000 from my retirement savings. But it's not just the money. It's the way they make me feel. Like I'm a burden. Like my only value is what I can provide for them. Like I should be grateful they even speak to me. Your story gave me permission to say no. This morning, I called my son and told him I wouldn't be giving him any more money. I also told him that if he wanted a relationship with me, he needed to start treating me with respect. He was angry, just like your daughter-in-law was. He accused me of being selfish and mean, but for the first time, I didn't apologize. I didn't back down. Thank you for showing me that it's never too late to choose yourself. I'm 82 years old, and I'm just learning that I matter too." I must have read that letter 20 times. Each time, I felt the same surge of purpose that had carried me through the hardest parts of my journey. This is why I kept the lottery ticket, I thought. Not for the money, but for this moment, for the chance to help someone else find their voice. Summer arrived with a heat wave that sent everyone to the lakefront. Robert and I spent long evenings walking along the beach, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and orange. We talked about everything, our childhoods, our marriages, our dreams for whatever years we had left. One evening, he surprised me with a question I wasn't expecting. "Dorothy, how would you feel about taking a trip together? Maybe to Ireland? I know you've always wanted to see the countryside your grandmother used to describe." I had told him about my Irish grandmother, who had filled my childhood with stories of rolling green hills and stone cottages. She'd always promised to take me there someday, but she died when I was 15, and the trip never happened. "Robert, that would cost a fortune." He smiled. "You can afford it now." It was true, but I still had trouble spending money on myself. Even with millions in the bank, I found myself checking prices at the grocery store, buying the store brand instead of name brand, wearing clothes until they were threadbare. Robert understood my hesitation. His wife had died of cancer 5 years earlier, and he'd been living modestly on his teacher's pension ever since. Suddenly having access to wealth, even by association, felt strange to both of us. "Let me ask you something," he said. "If you don't spend some of this money on experiences that bring you joy, what are you saving it for? I want to leave something for Michael and the children, and you will, but that's an inheritance for the future. What about living for today?" That night, I called Jamie to tell her about Robert's proposal. "Grandma, that's fantastic. You have to go." "It seems so extravagant." "So what? You know what's extravagant? Giving away $30,000 to people who treated you badly while you ate ramen noodles for dinner to save money." She had a point. "Besides," Jamie continued, "didn't you tell me once that experiences are more valuable than things? This isn't about spending money to show off. It's about feeding your soul." 2 months later, Robert and I were on a plane to Dublin, my first time traveling outside the United States. I was nervous about flying, about being so far from home, about sharing such an intimate experience with someone I was still learning to trust completely. Ireland was everything my grandmother had promised and more. We rented a car and drove through County Cork, stopping in small villages where people still greeted strangers like old friends. We visited ancient castles and walked through gardens that had been tended for centuries. In a small town called Kinsale, we found a bed and breakfast run by a woman named Siobhan, who reminded me of my grandmother. She served us tea and brown bread while telling stories about the local history, and when she learned about my recent adventures, I'd given her the abbreviated version of my story. She nodded knowingly. "Ah, you've learned the difference between being kind and being a doormat," she said. "That's a hard lesson at any age, but especially when you're older and people think you should just be grateful for whatever attention they give you." "Have you been through something similar?" I asked. "Haven't we all, love? My own daughter tried to convince me to sell this place and move into a flat near her in Dublin, said it would be easier for everyone. But everyone meant her, not me. This is my home, my life's work. I'm not giving it up just because it would be more convenient for her to visit." That conversation stayed with me as Robert and I continued our journey. In every pub, every shop, every conversation with locals, I met older people who had fought to maintain their independence and dignity. It wasn't just an American problem. It was universal. But so was the solution. Everywhere we went, I met people who had learned to value themselves, who had found ways to contribute to their communities that went beyond what they could provide financially to their families. On our last night in Ireland, Robert and I sat in a pub in Galway, listening to traditional music and watching people of all ages dance together. An elderly woman, probably in her 80s, was dancing with her great-grandson, both of them laughing as he tried to keep up with the complicated steps. "That's what I want," I said to Robert. "I want to be valued for who I am, not just what I can give. I want to contribute something meaningful to the world." "You already are," he said. "The documentary, the support groups, your writing, you're making a difference in people's lives. But it feels like I'm just getting started." He raised his glass of Guinness. "To just getting started, then." When we returned home, I was full of new energy and ideas. I'd kept a travel journal during our trip, writing about the people we met and the lessons they'd taught me. Those journal entries became the foundation for a book I never imagined I would write. Letters to My Younger Self, Lessons in Self-Worth After 70. Took me 2 years to complete. It combined my personal story with the stories of other seniors I'd met through my advocacy work, as well as practical advice for families dealing with similar situations. The book was part memoir, part self-help guide, part love letter to anyone who has ever felt invisible in their own life. I wrote chapters on recognizing financial abuse, setting boundaries with adult children, finding purpose in later life, and most importantly, learning to believe you deserve better treatment regardless of your age. My editor, a sharp young woman named Sarah, who worked for a small press specializing in social justice issues, pushed me to be more direct in my writing than I was comfortable being. "Dorothy," she said during one of our editing sessions, "you keep apologizing in your prose. You'll make a strong point about standing up for yourself, then immediately add a paragraph about understanding the other person's perspective. While empathy is admirable, you're undermining your own message. I don't want to seem angry or bitter." "Why not? You have every right to be angry about how you were treated. Anger can be productive if it motivates positive change." She was right, but it was hard to break a lifetime habit of making everyone else comfortable. Even in my own book, I was worried about coming across as too demanding, too difficult, too much. The breakthrough came when I was writing a chapter about the guilt that accompanies standing up for yourself. I was sharing the story of another woman from my support group, Helen, whose daughter had been stealing money from her bank account for years. When Helen finally confronted her daughter and threatened to press charges, the daughter accused her of being vindictive and cruel. "After everything I've done for you," the daughter had said, "this is how you repay me?" Helen had called me that night, sobbing. "Maybe I am being mean," she said. "Maybe I should just let it go." "Helen," I had told her, "if someone was stealing from your neighbor, what would you advise your neighbor to do? Call the police immediately. Then why are you different? Why do you deserve less protection just because the thief is your daughter?" As I wrote that conversation, I realized I was talking to myself as much as to Helen. Why did we older women think we deserved less respect, less protection, less consideration than we would give to anyone else? Sarah was right. I needed to stop apologizing for taking up space in my own story. The revised version of the book was stronger, more direct, more honest. I wrote about the rage I felt when Sandra called me a thief on television. I wrote about the years of swallowed words and suppressed needs. I wrote about the liberation that came with finally saying no. But I also wrote about forgiveness. Not the kind that pretends nothing happened, but the kind that releases you from carrying someone else's toxicity in your heart. I wrote about the joy of discovering new parts of yourself at any age. I wrote about love that celebrates rather than diminishes, and how it's never too late to find it. The book was published in September, 3 years after I'd found the lottery ticket. We had a small launch party at the bookstore in Lincoln Park where I'd rediscovered my love of reading. The owner, a kind man named David, who had become a friend over the years, decorated the small event space with photos from my Irish trip and copies of some of my favorite poems. Michael and Catherine came, of course, as did Kevin and Jamie. Robert stood beside me as I read excerpts to a crowd of about 30 people. Friends from the senior center, neighbors, members of my writing group, and several people I'd met through my advocacy work. But the most meaningful presence was Mrs. Chen from my old building. She was 87 now and didn't travel much anymore, but she'd taken the L all the way from Rogers Park to be there. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered as she hugged me after the reading. "Look how you've grown." The book didn't become a bestseller, but it didn't need to. What mattered was the letters I received from readers who saw their own experiences reflected in my story. Letters from adult children who recognized their own behavior and worked to change it. Letters from seniors who found the courage to set boundaries. Letters from families who used the book as a starting point for difficult but necessary conversations. One letter came from surprising source, Sandra. "Dorothy," she wrote, "I read your book. Michael gave me a copy which I initially resented. I thought it would be a 400-page attack on me, and honestly, parts of it were hard to read. But by the end, I understood something I'd never grasped before. You weren't just asking for respect. You were asking to be seen as a whole person, not just as a resource. I realize now that I never saw you that way. I saw you as Michael's mother, the children's grandmother, someone whose job it was to make our lives easier. I never thought about what your life was like when we weren't around. I never wondered if you were lonely or scared or struggling. I just assumed you were fine, because it was easier than dealing with the possibility that you might need something from us instead of the other way around. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't think I deserve it. But I wanted you to know that your story has changed how I think about the elderly people in my life. My new husband's parents live nearby, and I've been making an effort to really see them, not just visit them out of obligation. I hope you're happy. I hope you know that despite everything, you raised a good son who loves you deeply. And I hope someday Jamie and Kevin will read your book and understand how lucky they are to have a grandmother who fought so hard to remain in their lives. Thank you for not giving up on yourself." I read that letter several times, feeling a complex mixture of validation and sadness. Sandra would never be the daughter-in-law I'd hoped for, but she had grown into someone capable of self-reflection and genuine remorse. That was more than I'd ever expected. As I write this now, it's been 5 years since I found that lottery ticket. 5 years since I made the decision that changed everything. Robert and I married last spring in a simple ceremony in my apartment, surrounded by the family and friends who had supported me through my transformation. Jamie walked me down the short aisle from my kitchen to my living room, where Robert waited with tears in his eyes. Michael officiated. He'd gotten ordained online just for the occasion, and Kevin provided music on a guitar he'd learned to play. At 77 and 81, we didn't need a big wedding or expensive reception. We just needed to publicly declare our commitment to loving each other exactly as we are, for whatever time we have left. Sandra sent a beautiful card and a generous gift. She didn't attend, and I didn't expect her to, but the gesture felt genuine and healing. My book led to speaking engagements at senior centers, libraries, and even a few colleges where students were studying gerontology or social work. I've testified before the state legislature about elder abuse prevention. I've consulted on policies designed to protect seniors from financial exploitation. But the work I'm most proud of is the Dignity Project that Jamie and I started together. It's a nonprofit organization that provides resources and support for older adults dealing with family conflict and financial abuse. We run support groups, provide legal referrals, and most importantly, help seniors recognize that they deserve better treatment regardless of their age. The lottery money funded the project's startup costs and continues to support our operating expenses. Finally, the money that started this whole journey is being used for something that feels truly meaningful. Jamie graduated summa cum laude from Northwestern and now works as an investigative journalist for the Chicago Tribune, specializing in stories about vulnerable populations. Her documentary about elder abuse has been shown at film festivals across the country and is now used as a training tool by social workers and law enforcement. Kevin finished his computer science degree and developed an app that helps seniors navigate digital banking safely and recognize online scams. He credits our chess games for teaching him strategic thinking, but I think his compassion for older adults comes from watching his grandmother find her voice. Michael and Catherine bought a house just 3 blocks from my apartment. Partly, he claims, so they can keep an eye on me, but mostly so we can see each other more regularly. Sunday dinners have expanded to include Catherine's parents, who have become dear friends of mine. We have a real family now. Messy and complicated and full of love. And me? I'm still writing, still volunteering, still learning new things about myself. Last month, I started taking piano lessons with a teacher who specializes in adult beginners. My fingers are stiff with arthritis, and I'll never be a virtuoso, but there's something miraculous about creating music at this stage of my life. Robert and I are planning another trip, to Italy this time, to see the art and architecture I've been reading about. We talk about the future in terms of experiences we want to have, places we want to see, people we want to meet. Not in terms of how many years we have left, but in terms of how much life we can fit into those years. Sometimes people ask me if I regret keeping the lottery ticket instead of giving it to Sandra. If I worry that I was too harsh, too selfish, too unforgiving, the answer is no. I don't regret it for a second. But let me be clear about what I don't regret. I don't regret standing up for myself. I don't regret refusing to be called a thief for claiming something that was thrown away on my property. I don't regret setting boundaries with people who had spent years taking advantage of my generosity. Most importantly, I don't regret choosing to see myself as a person worthy of respect and love, not just as a convenient source of money and services. The lottery ticket was never really about the money. It was about recognizing my own worth. It was about learning that I mattered, that my happiness was important, that I deserved better treatment than I'd been accepting. If Sandra hadn't thrown that ticket away, if I'd never found it, would I have eventually found the courage to change my life? I honestly don't know. Maybe the gradual erosion of my dignity would have continued until there was nothing left of me. Or maybe some other catalyst would have appeared. Maybe I would have gotten sick and realized my family only visited when they needed something. Maybe I would have run out of money to give and discovered who really cared about me. Maybe I would have simply reached a breaking point where I couldn't pretend to be fine anymore. But the lottery ticket came when I was ready to claim it, ready to stop apologizing for existing, ready to value myself the way I valuable others, ready to believe I deserved better. The real lottery wasn't the $57 million. The real lottery was learning at 74 years old that it's never too late to start living as if you matter, because you do matter. Whatever your age, whatever your circumstances, whatever mistakes you've made or been told you've made, you matter. You deserve respect. You deserve love that doesn't come with conditions. You deserve to take up space in your own life. If you're watching this and seeing yourself in my story, if you're tired of being treated like your only value is what you can provide for other people, if you're ready to stop apologizing for having needs and wants of your own, please know that change is possible. It's never too late to choose yourself. You don't need a lottery ticket to claim your worth. You just need the courage to believe you deserve better, and the strength to enforce that belief even when others resist. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you had to choose between being taken advantage of and being called selfish? Have you ever discovered something that belonged to you, only to have others claim it was theirs? Tell me your story in the comments below. If my story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe. Sometimes the most important message someone needs to hear is that they're not alone, and that it's never too late to stand up for themselves. Share this video with someone who might need to hear it too, because sometimes the greatest fortune isn't what you find, it's what you finally decide you're worth keeping.